Hey team, it's Mr. Z, and today for our skill video, we're going to go ahead and look at end behavior. So let's go ahead and dive on in. So essentially, end behavior is asking two questions. What happens as my graph goes to the left, and what happens as my graph goes to the right? In symbols, it is represented as x approaches negative infinity, aka what happens as my graph goes to the left as it gets increasingly more negative. The other one is x approaches positive infinity. This is the same thing as saying as what happens as my graph goes to the right. So when I'm following this, I'm going to trace my graph to the left, and I see that it's riding along this asymptote. It is approaching the number 3. It is never going to actually touch it, but it might as well be equal to it. So I can summarize this discovery as saying as f of x, the output is 3. Likewise, as x is increasingly getting further and further larger positive, it is approaching 3 as well. Let's do this again. So this is going to be the same format. Some of you might memorize that it's always going to start out like this. It's going to always look the same. F of x is going to be equal to something, and your job is to figure out what it is. Let's go ahead. As x is approaching negative infinity, so going from 0, let's go ahead and trace the graph, and let's go ahead and continue to be negative, 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 negative. What number is it approaching? Well, the asymptote is at -5. You zoom in and count yourself. So, -5. Likewise, as this graph is approaching to the right, it is approaching -5 as well. It will not always be the same. Now, if you're given an equation without a graph, we are currently building our ability to visualize equations. Right now, I would like you to use Desmos to graph it and then make your conclusions. So, when f of x is equal to 1 over x to the 5th, I look at this guy and notice how as I trace it going from the left, it is approaching the asymptote at 0. So I'm going to go ahead and record this discovery. What happens as my graph goes to the left? It's equal to 0. What happens as my graph goes to the right? Notice how I'm writing out the f of x part before I even know the answer. I go back, I trace it. So going from 0, it's going to be increasingly positive, and you can see as the x values increase, the y values continue to decrease, getting so close to 0. So the end behavior is 0. Let's go ahead and do one more. What happens when it's a negative over 1 over x to the 6? So I'm going to adjust my Desmos. Oh, looking at this guy, if you go ahead and look at the end behavior, as x is approaching negative infinity, it's getting really, really close to 0. It's not touching 0, but it's so close that the end behavior might as well be. It's like saying if you have 1 penny, you might as well have no dollars. So as x approaches negative infinity, f of x is equal to 0. And then as x approaches positive infinity, f of x is going to be equal to something. Notice how I wrote it out before I even answered it. Then as x is increasingly getting larger, it's going to be 0. You can go ahead and take the opportunity to play in Desmos. For example, if you see if I add a number, I add 3, the end behaviors change to the newfound asymptote. The end behavior would be going there. You can play around by seeing what happens as you change it from 6 to a 5 to a 4. Go ahead and play around with it. The more you play, the deeper your understanding will be. That's it for now.